What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. By goal.
I pronounce you.
By wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really?
Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm going to put it down like this so I can help the saints understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought because you got saved, everything was going to be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible. You know what it said. He who don't work don't eat. Slackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said, he who puts his hands to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at you. I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out. Deep game. This here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sawing nothing but you started trying to reach. But after him who was able to possess your fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now the point is was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing your hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. Oh, we can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. He'll work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yeah.
Thinking not strange, the fiery trials are to try you. You say, why you? But your church say, what would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was going to have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you're telling how good God is and can't nobody beat your talk. The next minute you're backsliding so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself because I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. But we soldiers, we got to remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's a fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his son. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, because the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're going to be on top. Choir, sing your hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it.
Yeah, well, good day, everybody. I want to stop it right there and say welcome. We always like to start the show with Praise Master G. You know, we believe with our big boy upstairs, they give us the ability to be here on this wonderful earth and do what we do. So we like to give him his little special shout out when we start the show. But welcome and welcome again to Can a Player Play. Let me bring in my esteemed colleague and we can get this thing going. Matthew, are you with us? Hello. Hello, Matthew. Okay, well, I guess he'll be joining us shortly. Let me see who we got here. I guess today, Dr. Brendan. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, and I don't want.
Hey, buddy, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, I was wondering if I was going to
you
have
lost
to be.
Me. I just got a call from our guest. He had the wrong number, so he's going to call in a second. And you were just getting ready to mess up his last name, I bet. Now I'll have a chance.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fantastic. You know, I'll let you mess it up because I definitely don't want to mess it up. I don't want to mess it up. But go ahead. I'll let you mess it up.
So let's check and see if Brendan's on the line here.
Yeah, I am. Sorry about that.
Oh, good. Brendan, we're glad to have you. Hi. I'm going to introduce you, and then Lamont and I are going to ask you a million questions, but let me introduce you first.
Fantastic.
We have today with us Brendan Gaughran, who holds a degree in molecular biology from the University of Connecticut. He also has an MBA from Bentley University. Brendan has spent 15 years in the healthcare field and was an executive for a major nutraceutical manufacturer before starting multiple companies of his own. The latest is Liver Medic, which you can find at livermedic.com. And he conducts health lectures to both physicians and the public. His research focuses primarily on gut health, liver health, endocrine system, adrenal fatigue, and optimum diets. Brendan, we're glad to have you with us today, and our topic is the real culprit. The real culprit behind disease in the United States. I am sure Lamont and I are really interested in that one because we want to know the real culprit behind everything. So thank you for joining us.
And some of us have gut issues.
You're not alone. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Definitely.
Before we go, and I have a question. What is a nutraceutical manufacturer?
That's a good place to start. So it's really a fancy term for vitamin supplement company. So this is sort of the alternative, the natural alternative to the pharmaceutical industry, which is where I started my career.
Oh, good. Well, good. Well, you can start wherever you like, but I guess the real question is, what is the real culprit behind disease in the United States?
Yeah, that is definitely the leading question every time I go out there and I talk to folks, and it's a rather large topic. So let's go ahead and dig right in. When we take a look at disease in the country, and we've noticed that there's a massive increase. This is certainly not obscured in terms of the information that your listeners already know. There is a massive increase in the amount of cancers, cardiac issues, brain health issues, organ issues in general. So where is this all coming from? Where is it driven and so forth? Certainly the environmentalists are going to say that a lot of it is environmental, and I will agree with them on that. But there are some sort of key drivers because our bodies are constantly monitoring our health and trying to equilibrate our body chemistry. So let's see if we can sort of draw a map and frame this out a little bit, where we were, where we are now, and what some of those key drivers are. Does that make sense? Should we start there?
Good.
All right. So say about 100 years or so ago, because we're talking about gut health, and gut health is really the focus and the center of all of these issues that we're talking about, because that's the one part of us that is consistently interacting with our environment, trying to selectively pull in nutrients while at the same time creating a barrier for making sure that toxins and parasites and other things that we don't want in our system stay out, okay? So that's sort of the basis for it. When we go back about 100 years or so ago, an average individual was taking in about 11 to 12 pounds of sugar annual. Now it's about 130, and that's a conservative estimate. So that alone is going to change things. 130 pounds of sugar annually, okay? That's a massive shift. Then when we take a look at the advent of antibiotics, and this is one that always ends up getting physicians. So in the last 20 or so years, the amount of antibiotics that an individual is taking in has doubled. And immediately I get hands in the crowd when I give this talk to physicians, and they said, "Well, that's not true. Scripts have gone down about 5 to 15% in the last 20 years." And I said, yes, it is not coming from scripts. It is coming from the food chain. It's the beef, it's the chicken, it's the pork, it's those things. Because there's been a consolidation of those types of farms, cattle farms and so forth, and chicken farms, they've had to rely on antibiotics to make sure that disease is not spread in the animal so that they can get that animal to market. So it's the antibiotics from the food stream that we're all of a sudden getting in massive doses in the last 20 years. Okay? On top of that, now you have the advent of GMO foods, genetically modified organisms. And I know to a lot of listeners, this is a very controversial subject. I'm not going to get into the genetics of it, the molecular genetics of it, because that sort of glasses the. As soon as I get into that, the eyes get glassed over, and I lose the entire audience. So, but what people need to keep in mind is that when we switch from conventional to GMO, the plant itself is now resistant to the pesticide/herbicide. Okay, so now the farmer has been given the green light to douse his soil with a lot more Roundup and other GMO herbicides and pesticides than he has ever before. Okay, so we're talking about, this is 10 to 20 times the amount of herbicide and pesticide that we've dealt with in the past. Not only that, but it's not on the surface of the produce anymore. It's also inside the produce. And one of the major chemicals that we've identified is glyphosate. So let me back up for a second. Given all of those things, and we can get into personal care products and endocrine disrupting chemicals and where they're from and what those are and the lists and all that stuff, because it can become somewhat overwhelming. So let's go 40 years back. Fatty liver disease was primarily a disease that only alcoholics got. About 75% of the liver disease patients 40 years ago that was via alcohol. Now it's completely switched. 75% of fatty liver sufferers are not alcohol-driven, but non-alcohol-driven. It's coming from food. It's this change in the microbiome, okay? So now let's get into the pathology of it a little bit. And that, by the way, is 1 to 4 to 1 in 3 people in America. That's a huge number. That's over 100 million people. And it's highly underdiagnosed because there are no nerves in the liver, so you're not going to get a pain sensation. It's only when you get other symptoms, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, adrenal fatigue, cardiovascular problems, all of those things that come under the heading of metabolic syndrome. And it's really one thing that's sort of driving this. So back to the pathology. The increase in antibiotics into the system obviously will strip a lot of the bacteria in your microbiome in your gut out. What ends up replacing it? Well, I just told you that you're taking a lot more sugar than we were ever before, not to mention the carbs, which is also playing a part in this. That's going to give an opportunistic organism like Candida the leg up. Okay, you've stripped it of, you've taken the players off the field, Candida runs on. Okay. The other thing that we talked about was the glyphosate and the GMO foods, right? So glyphosate, known to get into the digestive tract, poke holes in the digestive tract, creating leaky gut. 70% of blood flow from the small intestine goes directly to the liver. Then it goes into the liver and inhibits the liver's ability to remove toxins in what we call phase 2 conjugation. So it gets in the body, increases the toxins that are now spilling into the body, and then decreases your body's ability to neutralize and expel those. Those are major problems. The increase in Candida is also doing the same thing because they release aldehydes that break down small tissue in the gut. That opens up those same pores. Again, we're getting back to this leaky gut issue, which is a medical term that wasn't recognized 10, 15 years ago. Now it's commonplace, even in conventional medicine. That's allowing these same toxins to stream into the system. What's the first thing that your body ends up doing as a result of your gut being less selective? Well, your immune system is going to recognize all of these as foreign invaders, and you're going to get an immune spike. Okay, so that's the first line of defense. And over time, what ends up happening is you get into a chronically inflamed state. Sometimes people start to complain about, flatulence, IBS, sensitivity to foods. Sometimes it's allergens. Sometimes it's somewhat regular back pain, although, again, this is chronic inflammation, so it's sort of always in the background, These individuals may get a slightly, like a puffed out stomach or abdomen area. So obviously when that's getting pushed out, that's the inflammation. It's pushing out forward, but it's also pushing out backward. That's what most people don't get. Your spine is there, you don't see it, but it's pushing up against your spine, and unless it's pushing up against the nerve, you're not going to feel it, but when it does, that's your back pain. So now you're in a chronically inflamed state. Once these toxins sort of overwhelm the system and the immune system is sort of beaten back a little bit, that's when the sort of the next defense comes into play, and that's when all these toxins start to stream into the liver. The liver quickly sort of gets overwhelmed, and now the liver, in its last-ditch effort, has to create fat cells in which to store the toxins because it can't break it down. It's overwhelmed. As these fat cells build up, they either build up outside the liver and inside the liver or just inside the liver. So we can't really determine somebody who has fatty liver by looking at them. They could be obese. They might not be. But 80% of these individuals are type 2 diabetic, and the other 20% are either pre-diabetic or on their way. And the reason for that is, sure, your liver is the regulatory organ for the blood glucose cycle. It sends a signal to the pancreas to secrete insulin. It breaks down insulin. It's the major store of glucose in the form of glycogen. So it's that whole, it's the brain, essentially, for that diabetic process. So once these fat cells start to accumulate in the liver, they start to block blood flow to the hepatic cells and other cells in the liver. Those start to die. They start to break down, and those enzymes that are only present within the liver start to go into the blood, and then they get picked up on a test, and your doctor says, you got elevated liver enzymes. You've got a problem down in your liver. Okay, so that's where all of these issues are coming from. Okay, so when somebody ends up taking in, too much sugar, you end up changing the microbiome. These toxins are now more easily filtering into your body. Your liver is trying desperately to contain these toxins within, fat storage cells. And it sometimes will get overwhelmed. Your body is now circulating more toxins, more sugar as a defense mechanism to a lot of the damage that then causes. We start to increase the amount of cholesterol in our blood. Okay, so cholesterol is sort of this Band-Aid. We constantly look at cholesterol as sort of the bad guy, but it is, in effect, a defense mechanism that we have. We attack the defense mechanism and say, look, if there's high cholesterol, there's going to be some problems, so let's lower the cholesterol. And those are typically like statin drugs. What that does is that inadvertently lowers the amount of hormones that you can create, because every hormone requires cholesterol, so now you've negatively impacted the endocrine system. Let's go back for a second, and we'll get into this other piece of the pathology. I talked to you before about once you have leaky gut and you have the inflammation going on, eventually, chronic inflammation is a dangerous thing, and your body recognizes this. It can't constantly be in this state. So if enough time passes, your body recognizes this, and it has another defense mechanism for the chronic inflammation that is taking place. It starts to secrete cortisol. Cortisol will go in there and decrease the inflammation. Problem is you still have the toxins flowing through, so you haven't stopped the main problem. But you've created another, because now you have constant cortisol going on, secreting from your adrenal glands, which will eventually give you adrenal fatigue. And you're only supposed to have cortisol spike in the morning and then drop off in the afternoon or so that you have this cortisol, melatonin, serotonin cycle, which allows you to, A, handle stress during the day, and B, get to sleep. So now individuals, on top of all these other issues, can't handle stress as well. They can't sleep at night. That's further aggravating the natural detoxification cycles that happen in the liver, because that happens when you're asleep. So you see how all of these things are sort of tied together. And that's one of the main talking points that we have when we go out and we teach people how to eat, why you should be eating this way, what foods you ought to avoid, what this is doing to your body. And that's essentially the baseline for a lot of the common diseases nowadays.
What I'm hearing sounds pretty.
You're
number
going to
one,
die,
it sounds pretty.
Matthew.
That's exactly what I was
You're going to die, Matthew. That's what I'm hearing.
It sounds like I'm going to die before I get off the phone. I think I'm going to die soon. It makes sense. It makes too much sense here. It's like
it does.
I'm hearing
it
you
does.
say we're
it
really
does.
getting
he
loaded
actually
up
spelled it out.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what do you think, Lamont? You're not going with me. I'm going before you. What?
I don't know, man. I feel like I can't eat anything else no more unless I grow it myself. And then if I grow it myself, I have to test my soil before I do it. And if I'm gonna drink water, I don't know if I can go buy any water from anybody because really I don't know what's in that water unless I test it myself. So it's kind of scary there, Brendan. What do we do?
So I guess
Brenda, do you really work for the pharmaceutical companies, selling anti-anxiety medication? Is that what you're doing here, really? Pushing that? We're going to have to go out and get some of that before we finish.
I know it. Well, my apologies. I didn't mean to frighten anyone. However,
that's not true.
The president, the case of that's the state of the union, as the president would say, right?
We definitely pride ourselves.
Before you showed up.
Yeah, we definitely pride ourselves, sir, on guests such as yourself, because people really need to hear the truth. And a lot of times we hear people say, well, you can't handle the truth. But I think now in 2016 and moving forward, people need to learn how to handle the truth because you can't correct something if you don't know there's a problem.
That's right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Right.
And I, just to dovetail off of what you had just said, you can't be in my industry. And I'm not talking about the pharmaceutical industry because I sort of refer to that as the evil empire, which I jumped out of many years ago. You can't be in my industry and not be somewhat spiritual. You don't need to be religious, but spiritual. And you have to understand that this is sort of the age of Aquarius, the age of knowing. There's a cleansing going on. The veil is coming up. So people need to become aware of these things. They need to cleanse themselves physically and spiritually, and they need to know where the pitfalls are. So now that I've sort of detailed what these things are, now we can go into, what kinds of things should we be doing to actively keep ourselves healthy? What things should we be avoiding? Becoming an expert on reading labels. And that's really going to help a lot of folks because what you were talking about is absolutely right. Making sure that a lot of people do grow their own food, but that may not necessarily make a lot of sense for a lot of folks in the city, even out in the country. If you've got a number of kids and a full-time job, maybe two, that's not a reasonable alternative. And also, you have to take a look at your water sources. You have to contact your local utility, make sure they're not dropping fluoride in there, and then make sure that you've got a good reverse osmosis filter on your water. At the very least, make sure that's on there for drinking, if not showering and all the other stuff. So that's kind of a baseline. Some of the things that I tell people to avoid are the obvious ones, right? So the doctors have been telling us for years, stay away from, decrease your consumption of meats and alcohol, increase your consumption of vegetables and fruits. Well, those things are your alkaline bases, okay? And there's a lot of good science behind going after an alkaline or a high pH diet as opposed to an acidic diet. A lot of science behind that, and it's all good. There is a diet put out by some very smart research scientists over at Stanford University, and that is called the it'll come to me. Let's see if I can remember this. I just blanked on it. But when we're talking about sugars, one of the main reasons why you should decrease the amount of consumption of red meats is because and other animals is because that there is an actual sugar in there that is not recognized by the human body and is seen as a toxin or an invader, and it creates a lot of the problems that we now have related to some of these diseases. So that's the main and that actually came out just a few months ago, that they identified this sugar this compound. It's an actual compound, but it's a sugar-based compound. And that's the reason for the problems with, essentially not eating a vegan diet. The other thing I want to point out is oils. So back in the 70s, for instance, there was a massive study over in Europe, and they took a look at disease and how it correlates to fats. And the problem that they had was they did not differentiate fats. And so they had those nice, healthy, medium-chain triglycerides that you'd find in olive oil and coconut oil and avocado and so forth. And they mixed them up with highly processed polyunsaturated fats. Those are extremely dangerous. And when they ended up concluding the study, they found that this diet was driving diabetes, fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, strokes, so forth. Congress got involved, said, here's the science, we've got to do something, forced the food industry to remove the fats. That's where we got all that low-fat, low-cal food in the 80s. The problem is that stuff now tastes like cardboard. And the food industry decided we've got to do something, otherwise no one's going to buy this stuff. And so they started to introduce sugars. We did exactly the opposite of what we should have been doing. We should be cranking down the consumption of sugar. We should be cranking up the fats, the healthy fats, right? That's the biggest problem. So we still have a lot of these low-fat, low-cal foods that are complete garbage. Then we throw in synthetic sugars. That is one of the biggest problems. So these, zero-calorie sodas and all that stuff made with aspartame and amino sweet, those things are pure death for certain organs in the body, especially the liver.
What's a healthy fat?
So a healthy fat, it's a good question. So a healthy fat would be coconut oil for sure, red palm oil, that's another one. Avocado is a good one. Olive oil is a good one. I'm going to put a caveat on that. They need to check it against the Olive Association. There's 2 or 3 of them main in the world. One obviously in California, the other one in Italy, and there's another one in Greece. And the problem with olive oil is that it's the most heavily adulterated product in the grocery store. So even when you take a trip over to, say, Whole Foods, right, the panacea of grocery stores, they've checked against their 365 olive oil, found canola oil in it, okay? So we really do have to do our due diligence and make sure that they're not adulterating these products. And the problem with the processed vegetable oils is that when you take a saffron oil, you take canola oil, or you take any of these oils, they end up processing over 400 degrees for extended periods of time. They completely change their chemistry. They end up going essentially what we would refer to in chemistry as rancid. That means that it goes from a antioxidant state to a pro-oxidative, gets in your body, it's radical, it destroys cell membranes, it creates problems with biocascades. That creates a lot of disease.
Well, my mother used to always want to eat margarine to the point where she didn't like real butter. But it seems like to me that margarine is like, I always think of it as plastic. What's your thought of that?
Right. Yeah, and margarine is one of those really bad actors in the industry too. That is a completely synthetic alternative to butter. They're finding out now that butter is a very healthy fat to have. So, and it tastes great. So I'm all for it. The issue with butter is that you have to make sure that the source of the butter, the cow, has not been eating GMO grains. And because the GMO grains are getting into the cow and it's circulating in the body and it's getting into the milk and it gets concentrated in the fat, and there's your problem. So it's got to come from a clean source. So you get it from a clean source, that's an excellent fat to be taking. I cook with butter. I don't cook with olive oil because if there's any chefs from culinary institutes, they know this. Once you cook olive oil at above about 150 degrees, that too becomes rancid and becomes a pro-oxidative and you don't want to be doing that. That's a cold oil application. But I do cook with coconut oil. So coconut oil and butter is essentially what I cook with. So, yeah, margarine.
Let me ask
table.
a question about allergies. Because I hear, and I can't say I've read research about it, but I hear from, I sound like Donald Trump now, I hear people saying that nut allergies are on the rise. Is that accurate, or do you have any thoughts about nut-related allergies?
Yeah, so nut allergies are definitely on the rise. They have been, and if we took a look at a graph over the last 20, 25 years, they are pretty closely correlated with some of the other drivers that we were talking about, GMO foods, sugars, antibiotics. And again, what this is telling us is that there is a what we refer to as a dysbiosis, or a change in the bacteria levels in the digestive tract. Now, the bacteria that we've been given from mom is going to take us only so far if you start to take antibiotics. So, for instance, my wife is a grade school teacher. And in the beginning of the year, typical, she'll get 2 or 3 kids with allergies, okay? Then at the end of the year, that'll double. And every time there is a parent who comes in and says, this is after this child has had an allergic reaction within the classroom. Jimmy always had, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I don't understand this. Why is this happening? And I always ask the same question. Did he just have a cold? Did you just feed him an antibiotic? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. So you change the microbiome, you're allowing certain things to enter the body that weren't allowed before. Peanut butter just so happens to contain a lot of low molecular weight proteins that more easily pass through the digestive tract once it gets permeated and pores start to appear. That's one of the reasons why nut allergies are a little bit higher than the others. Same thing with strawberries, same thing with shellfish. They have small molecular weight proteins that can permeate into the body if we give it that chance. And the antibiotics definitely give it that kickstart. The other thing is, your MSGs, your artificial colors, your artificial flavors. The amount of sugar that you end up taking in, of course, the high fructose corn syrup, everybody knows that is bad. But again, that's feeding candida, and we've said that the candida start to secrete aldehydes that break down that soft tissue that also allow that leaky gut. And again, once those things pass into the body and get picked up by your immune system has never seen this before. It's only seen some of those proteins in its partially digested forms, never in a full form. So it does not recognize it anymore, and it is not useful. So that's the reason for these allergies.
Do you recommend, I think you do, because of something you said a few moments ago, we're talking about acidic and alkaline diets. Do you recommend a diet that's more alkaline in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you're going to find that the alkaline diets contain vegetables, mostly green leafy vegetables, but vegetables just the same, and fruits. And the stuff that's really acidic are your meats. Your pork is one of the most acidic. It also contains parasites, which that's a whole other issue. Alcohol, obviously, is more acidic still. One of the things that I regularly do, especially in cold season, is I end up making my own homegrown cough syrup and an immune sort of elixir. And one of the best things that you can put in your body is apple cider vinegar, extremely alkaline. It's the only alkaline vinegar, by the way, and it's based not on its pH outside the body, but in its pH inside the body. So, I cook down elderberries. I end up putting apple cider vinegar in.
Do you take?
As much as you yourself can withstand. It's pretty strong.
So, yeah, it is. I was just
way.
thinking that. My nose was turning up when you were talking about it.
Right. Yeah. Let me tell you, it's not that easy to get my 9-year-old to take this stuff.
What do you take, like
really
a teaspoon? Do you take a quart? How much do you take?
Yeah, so I'll take a teaspoon of the stuff. Absolutely. So if you can get elderberry, go out into your local stores to see if you can get elderberry. It's not that hard a product to get. You can cook it down, and there's lots of recipes out there on the web. Add some raw honey. Got to be raw, because the processed honey takes out a lot of the benefits, the immune benefits that the bees are making in the hive. So that, garlic, lemon, apple cider vinegar, you put that sort of combination together, and you enter flu season, you're not going to have a problem. And you do it proactively, So that's the best way to avoid getting a cold. You're boosting your immune system. And then you just got to, as I said before, go on an alkaline diet. Stay away from the processed oils. Make sure your water is clean. Try to decrease the amount of meats that you're getting. If you're going to consume meats, know where it's coming from. I mean, even those folks that go over to Whole Foods, they just came out with an article recently where they're getting around the grass-fed label by giving the cows GMO corn right up until slaughter. About 2 weeks before, they put them on an all-grass diet, and then they put them to slaughter. Now they can slap on a grass-fed label on it. So you are not getting what you think you're paying for. Wow. And the consumer should be aware of these things.
Well, I want to ask you a question about water.
I was going to ask that one, too. What's up with that alkalinity water that they selling? The alkaline water.
Yeah, and sometimes it's referred to as structured water, and other times, they end up adding some minerals in there, and sometimes, of course, the minerals are being complemented naturally, and then, of course, they'll test for the arsenic levels and lead levels and all that stuff. I'm a big believer in it. You can end up paying a lot of money for that stuff, though. So I always tell people to be careful of that. Yes, alkaline water is beneficial. Structured water is beneficial. It's better than just your regular old pH neutral tap water. Totally agree.
What about water in plastic bottles?
Great question. So when we're going out and we're taking a look at plastic bottled water and which one should I choose, this is always a huge conflict, and it's even difficult for me who's been in the industry and watches this on a regular basis. But here are my two guidelines for this. Number one, always make sure there's no fluoride in it. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. It's a known neurotoxin. It's typically a byproduct of the agricultural industry. If they couldn't throw it in our water, they would have to put it in barrels and stick it underneath mountains. That's the classification of how hazardous this chemical is, and then they go ahead and they dump it in the water. Number two, plastic bottles. The more rigid the bottle, the less plasticizers are in the bottle, the less the plasticizers will leach into the water. Those plasticizers are typically endocrine disrupting chemicals. And, of course, it's then up to the liver to remove them once they get into the body, and that doesn't always happen. So great question.
So what about this story that if you leave the bottles water in hot cars and things like that, it's going to leach out stuff into the water? What's your opinion about that?
Yep. So the higher the of course, it's got to be pretty high. The higher the temperature, the more likely it is that those chemicals end up getting into the water. So if you stick that bottled water in a car, and of course in the summer in direct sunlight, we're probably talking 130, maybe 120, 130 degrees in a car easily. Then you could run your own experiment. Take that bottle of water, bring it inside, put it in the fridge. Now dump it into a glass and drink it. Does it taste like plastic? If anybody is sensitive to clean water and knows what the difference in taste is, they'll taste a difference. There is going to be an increase in the amount of leaching that takes place at higher temperatures. It just makes sense. This is another thing that people ought to be aware of when they're shopping for things like tomato sauces, tomato paste, anything that's vegetable-based that's acidic. A lot of cans are lined with BPA. BPA is a known endocrine disrupting chemical. The more acidic the constituents are,
so you'd rather get
the more
them
likely it is.
In glass containers.
You got it. You got it. Otherwise,
So,
it's going to pull it right in.
You're not saying across the board don't drink water in plastic containers, are you?
No, I'm not. No, there are
Okay.
manufacturers of water that produce highly tensile structured bottles with very little plasticizers in there and don't throw fluoride in. Who they are ends up changing a lot. Don't trust any don't trust any bottle that is manufactured by a subsidiary of Pepsi or Coke, because they love dropping fluoride in there and they get real cheap with their bottles.
Wow. That's good to know. That's good stuff.
What about Publix?
Yeah, you know who does a really good job of breaking this whole thing down is Food Babe. So I'm pretty sure she's done an analysis on, like the major manufacturers and distributors of bottled water, and she's sort of identified the ones. Food Babe.
Food Babe?
You've never? Yeah, Food Babe. She's kind of an industry insider.
Somebody related to Lamont. That's what you're talking about.
Somebody
he hangs out with.
See, there you go. I haven't started bashing you yet on the show yet. Today, I've been very good.
Brendan, I just want to thank you.
No, stop. No, Brendan, I want to jump back on the liver right quick. What is there a food or a vitamin, and then I get back on bashing Matthew in a second. But real quickly, back on the liver, is there a food or a vitamin or what would you suggest for somebody that always would like to clean their liver? Is there something going on with that?
Yeah. So milk thistle is sort of the go-to for a lot of physicians and individuals, and that's a great source to clean the liver, probably one of the best. The active molecule in there or compound is silibin, or sometimes called silymarin. That's what's doing all of the, kickstarting that detox phase within the liver. That's important. People ought to be taking a supplement all the time. Milk thistle, and the active is silibin or silymarin. So that active, it is in about a 10% concentration in milk thistle. So you want to look for the active ingredient, not just the milk thistle. That's where Liver Medics sort of got its base. So we started to recognize this was a problem, and I created a company for this to remove toxins from people's bodies.
So we can go on your website and get information about that?
Yeah, you can, and there's a lot of articles on there that talk about health, how to eat, what things to avoid, or these chemicals, where they come from, what they are, so that you can become your own expert at reading ingredients. And then the supplements are consistently purchased by naturopaths and recommended. And I always get doctors who say that the test results are, phenomenal, and the liver enzyme counts come way down. I actually had the assistant dean to the naturopathic college up here in New England pulled the product into her dispensary. She's got an entire dispensary. She decided not to go with that. She went with hepatidin, which is our main selling product, because it worked better than any of the stuff that she had at her disposal. So it's very effective.
Okay, Brendan, I know at the end of the show we're going to ask for you to give your information to our listeners, but since we're right here right now, we're talking about that, could you give them that information right now as well?
Sure, yeah. So the website is livermedic.com, and there's a toll-free number, 800-387-2278. And we have a Facebook page, and we post articles, health-related articles, every day, very informative, not just on the liver, water, GMO technology, what is behind, the bees dying, things that you shouldn't be putting in your lawn. We cover everything. So it's a real good source of information for folks.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Matthew.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Brendan. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to make mention one thing that your listeners are going to be so well educated after this piece, because I walk into a lot of physician lectures, and about half the crowd doesn't know about this. So I want to pay careful attention to this next tip. It is called the MTHFR gene mutation. Okay, not very well known, but the key with this is that everybody has this gene in their body, and if this gene is working properly, and it's actually two components to this gene. If this gene is working properly, you can methylate compounds in your body. Okay, so what does that mean? There's over 150 compounds in your body that need methylation in order to operate correctly. That means your vitamin D. That means your iron. That means being able to break down steroids, being able to break down hormones, being able to remove toxins from your body. So you can imagine if this thing isn't working properly, you can't do those things or do them effectively. That's the key. So we're starting to find out. A few years ago, they thought that this only affected 3 to 5% of the population. They're now finding out it's affecting somewhere between 70 to 80% of the population. So people's ability to methylate within their body is nowhere near as effective as we thought, and this is negatively affecting their health outcomes. So there's a test. People can find out if they have this MTHFR gene mutation, and, of course, after that, they can figure out which foods to avoid, which kinds of medications they shouldn't be taking. If an individual, like I ended up going to UConn, I was referred to as a lightweight, okay, when it came to drinking. If you are a lightweight, that might be an indication that you have the MTHFR gene mutation, okay? If you react severely to certain medications, that's also an indication.
It's an indication that you what? That you methylate well or not so well?
That you don't methylate well, and that you have this gene mutation, and that it's keeping things in your body that shouldn't be, like toxins, and your ability to break things down. Yeah, and that's a major driver. That is something that even conventional physicians are having some problems with, but the research is just coming out now, and that's going to be a major staple when physicians start going through medical school in the next couple of years. That's going to be part of their study. But right now, a lot of physicians don't know about it. The only ones that really know about it are progressive functional docs.
So what's the test?
It's actually MTHFR gene test. So you can go right in there and get that. It's about a $200 test. There's also a take-home test that you can get that I heard a couple of doctors talking about, 23andme.com. I don't have any affiliation with them whatsoever. I think it's about $100, and they go through an entire comparison with your genes, okay? And they will pull out markers. And two of the markers that they pull out, interestingly enough, are the MTHFR gene markers. And so in addition to all the other information that they'll give you, your genetic predisposition to certain things, it will also tell you whether or not you have this MTHFR gene mutation. And it's very helpful. So just a good piece of information for people to know about out there.
Matthew, you got it.
Yes, I got it. I have a question about statins that you were talking about. You were saying earlier about cholesterol, and cholesterol is trying to do something helpful in the body. I'm assuming that if it gets too high, it's not healthy. Would you agree with that, or what's your opinion about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You think about cholesterol as firefighters, okay? So if the building is burning too hot, what will end up happening? They'll end up calling more, fire trucks, and a lot more firefighters are going to come to the fire. Mm-hmm. So if you have a lot of firefighters or a lot of cholesterol in your body, you know something's wrong. There's a fire burning in your body. You just haven't figured out what the problem is. And the problem that we're resorting to in the medical community is we're going around, racing around, and taking the firefighters out of the mix. And that's exactly what we shouldn't be doing. One of the major side effects of that is that cholesterol is a requirement for your entire endocrine system to be working properly. Mm-hmm. So you start removing cholesterol, which means you start removing fat. One of the big misconceptions, as we have become, as we've gone down this road, we've got a lot more brain abnormalities taking place, a lot more Alzheimer's, a lot more Parkinson's disease, a lot more of these issues with short-term, long-term memory disorder. People can't sleep. So it's affecting a lot of neurochemical processes within the brain. Well, your brain is about 80% fat, okay? So, if you remove the fat, you're going to remove things like the myelin sheath around axons, so things won't fire properly anymore. That's in addition to the reduction of hormones.
Do you have a cholesterol number? The classic one. I mean, people say that HDL and LDL, some of them are healthier and some are the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. I went to a cardiologist a couple of years ago, and he was a little bit scary to me because he only wanted to push statins, and he's telling me that he was on, I think, one or two of them himself. And this is a guy who's like 80 pounds overweight, and I'm thinking, I'm getting the hell out of here because this guy's going to get me killed.
Right.
Right. Yeah. It was scary.
You're not a good advocate for health. Right.
No.
Well, believe it or not,
so.
the one career path that leads to the shortest lifespan is physicians. I kid you not. So, and of course, there's a lot of variables involved there. It's not just because they've signed on to this health doctrine that's killing people. That's not the driver. But to your question, low density lipoproteins, or LDL, are much more dangerous than HDL. And there's a number of reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into the biochemistry. What that ratio ought to be and how high and how low those numbers ought to be really depends on the individual. My big contention is that you have to remove the stress from your life and you have to get on a good diet. And once an individual commits to a statin drug, there's not a whole lot that us in the alternative sciences can do. It's a very difficult thing to get somebody off a statin drug safely. So for those individuals who are currently on a statin drug, I do not recommend you jump off it tomorrow. There's severe ramifications for getting on and dropping off. That's not what I recommend at all. I had a very stressful job in my 20s. I wasn't eating properly. I wasn't getting any fitness in. I was working probably 80, 90 hours a week, and I had a high cholesterol issue. And I went in and they handed me a statin. And at that point I thought, okay, I don't want to get on this path. And I refused it. I cut back on my hours at work. I started walking more. I changed my diet. Everything dropped out. Okay, so that's the direction people have to go in. That's the first thing they ought to be doing.
Okay.
Great question.
All right. Okay, Lamont, I just want you to know that Brendan has told me I had a good question and two great questions so far.
We're keeping score?
Yes, because he was told he asked the best question of the century a few weeks ago, and he has decided he's the most brilliant interviewer on the planet, and it's hard for me to deal with. So I'm just trying to collect some points here, and I appreciate your help about it very much.
Oh, no problem. Well, I just have to figure out which one of you is the decision maker for pulling on hosts. That's the one who's the best questioner.
We have I invite him, but he has the veto power. So it's like, we got
well, in
a
that
complex
case, you're both
relationship
excellent.
Yes.
Should I be running for president yet? I'm sure I'd be better than the two choices I have now, right?
You're doing good so far.
Hey, look, you might be doing better than a couple people I know.
Right. Yeah, right. That's right. Getting good votes here.
So proper diet is mandatory, is what I'm understanding.
Proper diet. Yeah, absolutely. For those individuals who are already in a disease state or have IBS or have any of those challenges we talked about before, clean your liver.
Could you make a couple of quick comments about taking vitamins? And one question I do have about vitamins, since I take them every day, is would you recommend? I've heard, as I said, I've heard before this thing that I take liquid vitamins, and I'm wondering if there is it better to take liquid than regular pills, or is there opinion about that, and what you generally recommend?
Yeah, so this goes down to bioavailability and absorption rates. And while it's true liquid vitamins or liquids in general have a higher absorption rate, it's not necessarily so it's one of the variables that we ought to be looking at. So powders, liquids end up getting absorbed at rates slightly higher than 90% typically, unless there's something in there that's inhibiting it. It might be your own biochemistry that's inhibiting it. If we're looking at powders, they get absorbed at somewhere between, say, 85 and that low 90 range. So you're not really losing out much. Once you go to a capsule, a compressed capsule, that's when it sort of drops off a little bit. We're talking about somewhere in the mid 70s, low 70s to maybe the high 70s. So, and that also will depend on how the compression rates and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into that. So those are things that people ought to be looking at. The other thing that's just as important, if not more so, is what are the forms the vitamins are in. Always choose a formula that has methylated vitamins. So that'll be your methylated B vitamins, your methylfolates. So in other words, taking, say, a folic acid, folic acid has to go through a number of challenging biochemical reactions in order to be useful in the body. Don't bother. Make it easy for your body. Choose a methylated form. And it also uses up a lot of cofactors, which, of course, is not very beneficial for you, so why would you do it? Take a look at other ingredients, say magnesium stearate, for instance. That's in a lot of formulations. We're trying to get rid of it in one of the products that we have. It's in trace amounts. But it's been implicated in lowering T-cell counts or natural killer cells, which is a pretty critical part of your immune system. So those are the things that you want to look at. If you find a manufacturer that's got methylated forms of vitamins, then you've identified somebody who has good formulation knowledge, is not going cheap on raw materials, and you're going to get a pretty good product. So that's my take on vitamins.
Okay.
Would you recommend a daily multiple vitamins?
If you are eating properly, a multivitamin is not what I would go after. As you age, men should be taking something for the prostate. Everybody ought to be taking a medium chain triglyceride, either a red palm oil, coconut oil.
Wait.
CoQ10.
Go back to the prostate.
Okay.
What do you take for prostate?
So I make sure that I take raw pumpkin seed for one. So I make sure that I'm eating the right things. Raw pumpkin seed, tomatoes, because they have the lycopene in there. Saw palmetto is a very good supplement. Make sure you're getting it from a reputable source. And so if you're doing the saw palmetto, the lycopene, raw pumpkin seeds, so you could throw raw pumpkin seeds into a blender in your protein shake in the morning. That's perfectly fine. You've taken care of your prostate. You don't have to worry about it anymore, okay? So those are some of the keys. Of course, if you're eating a good diet, you shouldn't have a problem with that anyway. Lower your sugar and carbohydrate intake, increase the fiber, increase superfood consumption, and people can just go online and Google superfoods. Those are the chia seeds, the flax seeds, wheatgrass, blueberries, all of those, spinach, all that stuff. That should be a staple in your diet, okay? But the things that are more difficult to get are, your DHA EPA. That's the fish oil. A good cod liver oil, for instance. That's a great source. A CoQ10. That again is feeding the mitochondria, and that will help brain health. That will help cardiac health, and it's very difficult to get through diet. So those are the things that people ought to be taking. This, one a day idea of taking a vitamin and then you're going to be okay. The vitamins are typically not in the right form. They usually have excipients or other ingredients that are not good for you. They're duplicating what you already get from your diet, and they're not giving you anything that you don't typically get from your diet. So it's kind of a waste of time.
Right.
And they always should take something to detoxify the body, because you're getting toxins from the environment, your personal health care products, your toothpaste, your shampoos, your deodorants. your GMOs. If you're going out to eat, you're getting the GMO, unfortunately, even if you're going out and buying organic foods from the grocery store. So it is a constant maintenance thing. So that's what people ought to be aware of that.
Brendan, I want to thank you really quickly. We down like maybe the last 50 seconds of the show, and I would definitely thank you for taking your time out to come join us. And
yes,
I know
thank
Matthew
you.
wants to say thank you as well, and we'd definitely love to have you back anytime, man. 'Cause I came up with a whole bunch of questions we never did get to ask, so please consider coming back.
Oh, fantastic. I would love to. You guys are great. I appreciate it.
Don't be quiet now, Matthew. Say something.
Well, it gives me 50
we didn't even
seconds.
get to the endocrine system or sleep and stress and those
Right.
things. So, we've got some
more.
topics
Yeah,
to cover.
we'll talk. We got more questions. Absolutely, we certainly do.
Fantastic.
And Brendan, thank you so much thank you for coming on so quickly. I know that you were really accommodated us. We had a cancellation, and you really helped out this week, and it turned out to be a really good. You filled in wonderfully. So we will be talking to you soon.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. You guys are great. I love the show, and I definitely look forward to coming on again. It worked out for both
we'll
of
talk
us.
to you soon.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you,
Lamont, I
Brendan.
spoke. Now you can do your thing there.
See you guys next week on Kind of Player Play.
Okay, buddy.
2:30. Bye.
I never planned on losing my job, but losing my family's health insurance was an even tougher pill to swallow. So I looked into COBRA, but too pricey. Then I found out about special enrollment through Covered California, where I was able to choose from good health insurance companies I've actually heard of. I even got help paying for it. I had no idea someone was there for me. But Covered California really had my back.
To see if you qualify or to find one of our local experts, visit coveredca.com. Covered California. It's more than just health care. It's life care.
What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. Bye, goal.
I pronounce